Hello and welcome to You Are Loved. I am your host, Sarah McCormick, and I am so glad that you're here today. Today, we are going to be talking about my favorite Bible verse. I honestly don't remember when this verse came into my life because it's not your typical Bible verse that you learn in Sunday school or at church. But what I do know is that this verse came into my life when I needed it. So that verse is in Jeremiah chapter 29, and it is verse 11. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And yes, I do actually have that verse memorized. But let's give a little bit of context to this verse, because one of the things that I know that happens is people will rattle off Bible verses and completely take them out of context. So, probably about a year or so ago, I reconnected through Facebook with somebody that I used to know in high school. And it was really, really crazy because I hadn't talked to this person in over a decade. And one night I just was going through just stories about high school and my friends. And I thought to myself, I wonder how this person is doing. And surprisingly, I was able to find him on Facebook. We actually had a conversation because he goes, how do you know me? And I was like, okay, well, I'm married. I look different than I did when I was in high school. And so I gave him some information. I'm like, oh, hey, this is, your last name, and you have two brothers that we all hung out with, and we all rode the bus together, and we went to this place and we did that thing. And you hung out with me and my friend. And he's like, okay, I just wanted to make sure that I actually knew you before I added you as a friend. So I had posted not long after that about Jeremiah 29:11. And he said, do you actually know the story where that verse came from? And I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I totally took this verse out of context. I I blew it. I look like an idiot because I took this out of context. So I actually pulled out my Bible. He gave a brief overview of what it was about. But I pulled out my Bible because I said, I want to read this at least section of the chapter, because sometimes chapters in the Bible have different sections, they're different stories. So I pulled out my Bible and I opened up to Jeremiah chapter 29, and it starts with a letter to the exiles. So Jeremiah wrote a letter from Jerusalem to the elders, priests, prophets, and all the people who had been exiled to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. This was after King Joachim, the queen mother, the court officials, and all other officials of Judea, and all the craftsmen and artisans had been deported from Jerusalem. He sent a letter to Eliza, son of Sharpan, and Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, and they went to Babylon as King Zedekiah's ambassadors to Nebuchadnezzar. This is what Jeremiah's letter said. Okay, so we know that everyone was pretty much kicked out of Jerusalem. And this is what the letter said. This is what the Lord, the heavens armies, the God of Israel says to all the captives he has exiled to Babylon from Jerusalem. Build homes and plan to stay. Plant gardens and eat the food they produce. Marry and have children. Then find spouses for them so that you may have grandchildren. Multiply. Do not dwindle away. And work for the peace and prosperity of the city where I sent you to exile. Pray to the Lord for it his welfare will determine your welfare. This is what the Lord of the heavens armies, the God of Israel, says. Do not let your prophets and fortune tellers who are with you in the land of Babylon trick you. Do not listen to their dreams, because they are telling you lies in my name. I have not sent them, said the Lord. This is what the Lord says. You will be in Babylon for 70 years, but then I will come and do for you all the good things I have promised, and I will bring you home again. For I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope. In those days when you pray, I will listen. If you look for me wholeheartedly, you will find me. I will be found by you, says the Lord. I will end your captivity and restore your fortunes. I will gather you out of the nations where I sent you, and I will bring you home again to your homeland. You claim that the Lord has raised up prophets for you in Babylon, but this is what the Lord says about the king who sits on David's throne and all those still living here in Jerusalem, your relatives who were not exiled to Babylon. This is what the Lord, the heavens' armies, says. I will send war, famine, and disease upon them and make them like a bad fig, too rotten to eat. Yes, I will pursue them with war, famine, and disease, and I will scatter them around the world. In every nation where I send them, I will make them an object of damnation, horror, contempt, and mockery. For they refuse to listen to me, though I have spoken to them repeatedly through the prophets I sent. And you who are in exile have not listened either, says the Lord. Therefore, listen to the message from the Lord, all your captives there in Babylon. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of Israel, says about your prophets. Ahab, son of Kaliah, and Zedekiah, son of Messiah, who are telling you lies in my name. I will turn them over to Nebuchadnezzar for execution before your eyes. Their terrible fate will become proverbial, so that the Judean exiles will curse some by saying, May the Lord make you like Zedekiah and Ahab, whom the king of Babylon buried alive. For these men have done terrible things among my people. They have committed adultery, and their neighbors' wives have lied in my name, saying things I did not command. I am witness to all of this. I, the Lord, have spoken. So let's focus on the first half of that letter, which is to those who were exiled to Babylon. What did the Lord say to them? He said, marry and have children, and then find them spouses so that you can have grandchildren. Multiply, thrive. Don't just survive. Don't dwindle away. And work for peace and prosperity in the city where I've sent you. Pray the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare. So God sent them to Babylon and said, I want you to do well there. I want you to thrive there. I want your loyalty to be to growing where I have sent you. But then he also warns them to pay attention to what they're letting their ears hear, because there are people that are going to try and trick them. Do not let your prophets and fortune tellers who are with you in the land of Babylon trick you. Do not listen to their dreams, because they are telling you lies in my name. I have not sent them. But then in verse 10, the Lord tells them, you will be in Babylon for 70 years. So for some people, let's just think about normal human lifespans. For some of them, they will die in Babylon because they're older. Some of them conceivably could spend their entire life in Babylon. Say someone is pregnant when they're exiled, have a baby, lives to be 50, 60 years old. They spent their entire life in Babylon. But the Lord tells them, you will be in Babylon for 70 years. So you know that there's an end in sight. You know this is how long you're going to be there. And then he says, but I will come and do for you all the good things I have promised, and I will bring you home again. So I like to think of it this way. So my daughter started elementary school, and she is of the camp of, I don't want to go to school. You can't make me go to school. I never have fun in school. I hate school. I'm not. In fact, this morning she threw a huge temper tantrum about not wanting to go to school. And we said to her, Emma, it's only 3 hours. After 3 hours, Daddy and I are going to come and pick you up. And then after that, we can go out to lunch. Sound kind of familiar? You will be in Babylon for 70 years, but then I will come for you and do all the good things that I've promised, and I will bring you home again. This verse came into my life the beginning of 2019, end of 2018, beginning of 2019. And it came into my life during a time when I found out that the company that I was working for was significantly downsizing. We found out in November of 2018 that our last day of work was going to be March 13th, 2019, somewhere around there. And that was a huge blow to some people. There was somebody that I worked with on my team. We actually worked in the same office right next to each other. And she was really stressed out because she was the one who carried the benefits in her family. Her husband owns his own business, and it was more cost effective for the benefits to be through her than for them to pay for their own individual plans through his work. And I've been through a lot in my life that I know that it might not always seem it at first, but things always work out in the end. When I went to college to be a math teacher, and I got through everything except for 5 weeks into my student teaching. I couldn't do it anymore. I was so beat down. The person that I was with at the school that I was doing my student teaching didn't really want to help me. And when I asked for a new placement, I didn't get one. And there was some hinky stuff that went on there. In fact, one of the professors, didn't get tenured because of what happened, because the other math professors were very upset at how the situation was handled. And I was distraught. I didn't know what I was going to do. This had been my plan since I was in 7th grade. I was going to be a math teacher. That's what I was going to do. And I didn't know what my new plan was going to be, because for 10, 12 years of my life, I was going to be a math teacher. And then we changed what we were doing, and we shifted our thinking, and our main focus went from, okay, I'm going to be a math teacher, to, okay, I want to graduate on time. I want to be able to walk and graduate on time. And I did. I did independent study courses. My advisor at college actually called different colleges who had independent study courses to find out how quickly one could complete one of these independent study courses, because she knew that I wanted to be able to walk at graduation with my husband. We were engaged at the time. And so I put in all of this work. And then we graduated. I got to walk. I didn't get my diploma on the day of graduation because my last final, the transcript hadn't come through yet. So I officially couldn't graduate because they didn't have all the credits that I needed. But I did still have a May date of graduation because my transcript came in before the end of May. So I was able to get a May date of graduation, which was my goal. I was able to walk, and I was able to have a May date of graduation. And then after I graduated, I thought, well, now what am I going to do? Everything that I had built up for was to be a math teacher. And now I'm not. And what am I going to do? So I had a math degree, and I decided to apply to different places. One of the places that I applied to was Harleysville Insurance, because it's right down the street. One of my friends actually did his career study there, and I had known some people who had worked there in the past. So sent in my application for the loss control department, which sounded very similar to underwriting in my, 22-year-old mind. But a lot of it had to deal with like fire code and smoke detectors and making sure that the places that we insured were doing everything possible to avoid a loss. Why it's called loss control. So I applied and I got an interview and I went in for the interview and everything seemed to go well. And then a couple of days later, I got a call and it was from the manager that I had interviewed with, and she wanted to hire me. And I found out the main reason she wanted to hire me was because she was responsible for doing all of the reports and she didn't want to do the reports. And me having a math background, it fit perfectly. So that's how I got the job. Spent 4 years in loss control and then had pretty much had it, is the only way that I can say it. I worked in home office and I was a tech, which meant that I, for lack of a better words, was a secretary. We had field reps who would go out and do the actual visits, and then they would do a report, and then we would get the report, and then we would send out the recommendations to the insured, and then we would follow up on them, which is why I say that we were a secretary. Well, some of our reps didn't really understand how everything worked. They were newer. And one day I got reamed out on the phone by one of our reps, and it started with, "Who is your manager?" And I thought to myself, you don't know who my manager is? She's literally the only manager of this department. Like, you don't know who it is? That's kind of sad. And then I explained to him in my 26-year-old way that he pretty much dropped the ball. The insured had a question on a recommendation. I sent him notice that the insured had a question on a recommendation. He needed to call them back to clarify because I couldn't clarify because I didn't know exactly what he was looking for. And he just didn't do it. And then he was upset because there was documentation that he didn't do it. And after that phone call, I went to my manager and I said, well, I don't know if you're going to get a complaint about me or not, but I'm applying for jobs to get out of this department because I'm doing way more work than I should be and not getting compensated for it. I really should be the team lead, and you won't give me that role, even though everybody comes to me and asks me questions, and I pretty much ran the team. So a few years before, I had met with my boss for an evaluation. You know, you do those like bi-yearly, this is where you are, we're going to rate you on how you're doing. And he asked me if I had ever thought about being a business analyst. And I really hadn't thought about it before. And he said, you would be really good at it, like really good at it. So after this phone call, I went on and I applied for every business analyst job that they had. There were 3 of them, and I applied for all 3. I got an interview for one of them and went to the interview. It was in commercial lines processing. And the only commercial lines experience that I had was sending recommendations for commercial lines accounts because the loss control department was in the commercial lines department. Didn't know how to read an insurance policy. Didn't know anything about commercial lines prefixes, how AQS worked, which was our policy system, anything like that. Didn't know any of that. And I feel that I really got lucky that I got hired because I had 0 experience. But that manager, director saw in me that I could do this because it was a way of how your brain worked. And my brain worked very similar to how her brain worked. And she was actually a business analyst before she got the role of being, I think she was actually at that point in time, the vice president of commercial lines processing. So she was really high up. And she saw that my brain worked the way that you need a business analyst's brain to work. So she took a chance on me and she hired me. And I learned so much during that time. I was able to apply the stuff that I had learned in loss control to what I was learning in commercial lines processing. I was able to fix processes in commercial lines processing that I wasn't able to fix when I was in loss control. I was loving life. I felt like I was really doing good. I did so many projects when I was a business analyst that I can't even name all of them. But when I started, and then when I ended, we were in a completely different place. And it was so much better because we had implemented these different processes that made us more efficient. The same month that I got the job as a business analyst in commercial lines processing was the same month that Nationwide acquired us. And they kind of left us alone for a while. It was part of the contract. So for the first 2 years of the merger, they weren't allowed to make any changes. So pretty much we were under Nationwide's health insurance and we were getting Nationwide paychecks, but we were still operating as Harleysville. And after those 2 years was up, then we started combining our forces. So soon we started seeing departments being managed by people in Nationwide. Billing went to be under the Nationwide umbrella. Training went to be under the Nationwide umbrella. Our training department actually split up and became different pieces. We had the actual people who did the training. We had the people who wrote the lesson plans for the training. We had PKS, which was basically the people who updated all of our knowledge bases for how we are supposed to process things in our system. The department that I was in was one of the last departments to move over because they weren't exactly sure where to put us. So, literally, while I was out on maternity leave with Emma, we moved. So that was really fun because I'm sitting in the recovery room and I'm like, I don't know who I'm supposed to tell that I'm not coming back into work tomorrow because I was reporting to Rachel and now I'm going to be reporting to Tucker. So let's just send it to both of them. So we had finally moved under the Nationwide umbrella and we were there for, Emma was born in the end of 2015. So it was almost 3 years that we were under the Nationwide umbrella. And things had changed a lot. They were moving people around. They were trying to figure out what was going on. And my coworker and I, who started while I was out on maternity leave because the one that I previously had been working with retired. So this was all sorts of fun because my poor coworker was just kind of thrown in and like figure it out. But she was really good at what she did, and she did really well without me being there to guide her. And as we started moving over to Nationwide processes, we realized that we really didn't have a lot of work to do. I had gone from my entire day being filled with meetings and working on processes and working up documentation and working with the training department to get that documentation published and all of that to I just check a box and follow up with the person who's supposed to be doing the work because that's not me anymore. My coworker kept telling me, I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm waiting for them to tell us that they don't need us anymore. And that day came in November of 2018. And this was the third boss that I had. So I started with Tucker, and then Tucker moved to a different department and we got Brian. And then Brian was actually let go from the company. He was part of the beginning of the layoffs. So essentially what they did is they realized that our team could be merged in with another team and they had too many. We called them directors. They were directors at that time. That was their title. They had too many of them. So we got to experience Brian leaving. And when Nationwide would let you go, you would actually work for 60 days after you were notified that your position was being terminated. And during those 60 days, you weren't really expected to do a whole bunch of work, but what you were supposed to do is transfer knowledge. So whatever you did, you were supposed to transfer that knowledge to the person taking on your work. And your main focus after that was to find a new job. So they let you stay for 60 days so that you could apply internally and try and find a job somewhere else in the company. Well, unfortunately, Brian did not find a job inside the company. And in, I believe, August of that year, he was gone. So then we moved to Mike. And Mike was really great. He was really, really great because during that time in my life, my back was bothering me and I was spending a lot of time working from home because it was more comfortable than sitting in the office. And he completely understood and he was okay with me working from home 5 days a week because I was getting my work done. And then we found out that we were being let go. And Mike was one of those people where he really wanted to make sure that you were okay. He was a people focused person. And we would have our one on ones. And he would ask me how everything was going. And I said, Mike, honestly, everything is fine. I am not the least bit worried about not having a job in March. I've been around long enough and I've been through enough to know that this is part of the plan that God has for me, that I am where I am supposed to be. And this whole termination, them getting rid of my job, is part of the plan. And he kept checking up on me. Are you sure you're okay? Yes, I'm fine. Honestly, I'm okay. I'm trusting God that He knows what I'm supposed to do. He has a plan for me. The other thing is that Brian was very familiar with Young Living. His wife used Young Living, and I said to him when he was looking for a new job, I said, why don't you just sell oils? You can do that. So then when I found out that I was being terminated, I thought, well, I'll just sell oils. It's easy. I can do that. Well, it's not that easy. It's not as easy as one would make you think it is. But one of the other things that I realized is in March, when I was let go, that timing fell perfectly with when my daughter was kicked out of daycare, which is a whole other story all in and of itself. But what I want you to focus on here is my last day of work pretty much met up perfectly with my daughter not being able to go to daycare. She was 3 at the time. And when that happened, I said to my husband, I think that I am supposed to be home right now with her because she got completely beat up at daycare. They were telling her that she was a horrible kid, that she was a troublemaker, that she wouldn't behave. And all it really was that they didn't know how to communicate with her. They were speaking a different language and they were both getting frustrated because neither one could understand what the other one was saying. So it worked perfectly that I was able to be home with our daughter. We didn't have to rush and hurry and find another place for her to go because I had to go to work. I could be home with her. And then about a month later, my friend called me and said, I just got fired and I don't know what I'm going to do. So I told her, I said, if you need me to watch your girls while you go to a job interview, let me know. And then the next thing I know, she has a job and I'm watching her girls because she can't afford to send them to daycare. And I kept thinking, I never realized when I got notice in November of 2018 that this is where I was going to be 6 months later, 8 months later, a year later. And so I watched our girls. When school started in the fall, I took Emma to nursery school, and my friend's youngest was enrolled in the same nursery school. So it was great because I would take both of them. And then I would have a couple of hours twice a week that I could get stuff done at home. Then I would go pick them up and we would have lunch and then we would do some fun arts and crafts stuff. And then I would go pick up my son and my friend's oldest at the school. And then I would watch them until she was done work. And I kept thinking, wow, this is lucky that I got let go in November because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do these things. We would have been freaking out. What are we going to do with Emma? We would have had kids at 2 different daycares and that wouldn't have been fun because we didn't want to pull our son because he was in kindergarten and the bus route was all set up and there were only a few months left of school. So we let him go for the last few months because that's how everything worked out. And then the new school year started, and I was still watching my friends' girls. So that was the beginning of the 2019-2020 school year. We all know what happened in the beginning of 2020. And then in the fall of 2020, I decided to do cyber with my son. So I essentially became his teacher. And that was what I did while I was at home. So when I look back on it, that was part of God's plan to have me lose my job because there were other places that I needed to be. And this verse just stayed with me that when it looks like something bad is happening, it might not be as bad as you think it is. A lot of people, when they find out they're losing their job, freak out because they don't know what's going to happen. It's that fear of the unknown. And I was thinking this morning as I was getting out of the shower, I don't know for certain that God exists, but I also don't know for certain that he doesn't exist. So I almost think of God as Schrodinger's cat. Okay. Any Big Bang Theory fans out there? That's when I first learned about Schrodinger's cat. That in the box, the cat is both dead and alive. And you don't know until you open the box. So you can believe that the cat is alive or you can believe that the cat is dead. And I don't know for certain that God exists, but I choose to believe that he does because I have seen time and time again that he's got to exist. Otherwise, things wouldn't work out this way. That verse coming into my life when I needed it the most. The series of events from November of 2018 until now. And has it been easy? No, it has not been easy because God never promised that it was going to be easy, but he did promise that he would be there for us. And time again, I've seen that things happen and then better things come, which to me means there's got to be a God out there and he loves me and he's doing these things to help me. Only God knew that Emma was going to get kicked out of daycare. And he set that plan in motion that I was going to be able to be there for her when she got kicked out of daycare. And only God knew that the pandemic was going to happen. And he made sure that I was going to be there to support my kids when they needed it. I mean, that was one of the least stressful things ever is when the pandemic first started, my husband was able to work from home and I was able to help Jake with school, and they had little things that Emma could do from preschool that I was able to be there to support them, that we didn't have to worry about balancing two full-time work from home jobs while trying to keep Emma entertained and Jake doing his school. There really was no better thing that could have happened. And it sounds crazy to say that being let go from that job was a blessing, but it was. And now I have things all around my house that remind me of Jeremiah 29:11, because sometimes things get hard. And sometimes you think, this isn't how it's supposed to be. And then I remind myself that God is the author of my life. And he has my whole story planned out. And he loves me. So he's not going to hurt me. Not that long ago, I had a call with my mom. And I think it had to deal with insurance not covering my Stellara and everything that was happening with Randy. And I was just so upset. And I said to her, I said, why is this happening to me? Why? What did I do to deserve this? And that was what I said. What did I do to deserve this? And my mom goes, you didn't do anything. And God doesn't punish us. He doesn't punish us when we do something that he doesn't approve of. And that really stuck with me. That I wasn't being punished for something I did or I didn't do, but that there was a bigger meaning behind this, that I was supposed to experience something because good was going to come out of it. Because he never said that it would be easy. Time and time again, we see in the Bible that Christians are persecuted for their beliefs and that you need to stand up for them because God never said it was going to be easy. So that is where Jeremiah 29:11 comes in. For I know the plans that I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not harm you, not harm you. My plan is not to hurt you, not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. And every time I go through a rough time, I think of that. I think of, man, it's really tough what we're going through right now. But what could the purpose of this be? Because there's something else going on. We're going to learn from this, and things are going to be for the better. And with that, I'm going to wrap this up because I talked a lot longer than I expected to about when this verse first came into my life, but that's okay. That just means more content that I can record later. So thanks for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful day.